Hey, what is up everybody? This is Jason with devslopes.com, and in this video we are going to take a deep dive into using variables, and we're going to use a very important lesson about imports. So I've provided the starter project source for you, so go ahead and download that, and then we're going to be building on top of this, all right? And then the cool website, small project that we're going to be working on to learn all this stuff is going to be this right here. All right, so this looks pretty trashy right now, and we're gonna jazz this thing up using some Sass. So let's get to it. All right, so I've created a basic project folder for us. You know, I've got everything modularized so we can scale this. And what we're gonna start out with first is let's work with some base defaults to our web page. All right, so go ahead and open this up. And what we're going to do is first we're going to simply grab the body, and what we want to do to this is we want to make sure that it has a margin of 0 and then a padding of 0. And what this is going to do for us is it's going to make sure that the body of our page is sucked edge to edge. Sometimes browsers can add a little bit of margin or padding to the page, and we don't want any of that to happen. All right, so let's come down here, and next, let's work with some headers. All right, so we're gonna just define some basic header properties here. So with all of our header ones in this page, let's give them a color and a font family. So we're gonna go ahead and create a color here, and then I'm not gonna throw anything in it yet, and then we're gonna go ahead and create a font family. All right. We're gonna stick some stuff in here. So let's use some variables. All right, let's create some variables. So we know when we create a variable, it starts with a $, and we simply give it a name. So I'm just gonna call this brand light. And it's gonna be a light gray. And then we're gonna be working with a font family here. So why don't we go ahead and just call this font sans serif, okay? And then we'll give this a value of Georgia times and serif. Cool. And then we'll simply go ahead and grab this class, copy it, and slap it down here on the font family, and then grab the brand light, and we'll go ahead and throw it up here. And then we can save that. All right. Now we do have to set up our watcher so that all of these changes are going to take place and compile into CSS. So open up your terminal or your command line, and I want you to navigate into your project folder. Mine was on the desktop. I'm already there. And then let's set up our watcher again. Watch, and then remember we're going to watch the directory to compile into our CSS. All right, so we've got all that fun stuff happening. All right, so this looks good. Okay, we've created two variables, and remember, variables act like a bucket. Okay, they store values, just like in other programming languages like JavaScript. Variables store information, and the cool thing with these variables here is they can be reused and recycled throughout our web page. All right, we can just store stuff in it and then reuse it. All right, so let's continue down the folders here, and let's work with our header. Now, going back to our example page, let's refresh this. We changed the color here. What we want to do is we want to work with this header here. The header is actually this whole thing here, and then this is a header 1 inside of that. All right, and what we want to do is we want to add a background color to this header, and we want to center the header 1 tag. All right, so let's go back to Atom, and I do want you to pop open the index file here so you can see this. So remember, right now we're beginning to work with our layouts now, and we're supposed to use IDs inside of our layouts to grab layouts that can be positioned around the page that help organize our content. So I created a div here, and it's got an ID of header, and then we've got our header 1 inside of that, and that's exactly what we're going to be working with in this Sass file. So to grab our header, we're simply going to grab the header ID like so. And then we want to put a text align of center on this. Okay, we want to give it a display of block. And we want to make sure that this header, this is the div, remember, that's wrapped around the header 1 tag. We want to make sure that it has a width of 100%. And then this is where we're going to give it a background color. And then to give it a background color, let's go ahead and create a variable for this. So we will call this brand. This is going to be a darker color behind our header 1. So why don't we go ahead and call it dark? And then we're going to give it this, this is a dark green color here, so go ahead and copy that. All right, and then we can simply just grab the variable and we're going to throw it down here. All right, and go ahead and save that. Now let's go ahead and check this out and see what it looks like. I'm going to give the page a refresh. So that's looking pretty good. So what we're going to do now with this header 1 tag is we're going to add some padding to this, give it a little bit of space, and then we can actually adjust the margin and the padding to get rid of this white box up here. So let's go ahead and do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to nest an element selector inside of this header. And remember, you can target elements inside of your layout files, but you can't start it with an element. It has to start with the ID, and then you can go in and grab the header element. And remember, this is just a best practice when using the guidelines for this SMAX. All right, so let's go ahead and give it a margin of 0, because what's happening is header 1s by default, they come with margin added to it. So that's why it's pushing our div tag down. And then we want some padding to this. So let's do 10 pixels top and bottom, and then we'll do 0 left and right. And I went ahead and saved that. Everything compiled properly. Okay, perfect. So let's check this out. Give it a refresh, and there we go. So we removed the margin off of our header, and then we added some padding to make this look a little bit better. Cool. So now you're starting to understand how we can use these variables and how reusable they are. But I wonder if you've recognized that what we're doing right now, we are creating variables in each of our SASS partials. All right, and we want to really try to keep things organized and together, right? But by putting these variables in all of these partials, we're actually kind of separating all of them. So what if we could create one place, maybe a partial that could hold all of these variables for us at a global level? Well, we can do that. So go ahead and tuck up these folders. So let's go ahead and create a variables partial. So from the parent level of your SASS folder, go ahead and click on New File. And to create a partial, we lead with an underscore. And then we're just going to write variables.sass. Awesome. So we've got our variables SASS file. And when this compiles, our watcher, remember, grabs everything in the parent SASS directory. It's going to grab the variables, and all we have to do is make sure that we're importing it into our app SASS file. So go ahead and let's do the import, and we're going to grab variables.sass. Okay, awesome. And we can go ahead and save that. Now, one important thing to note is you notice that I put the variables at the very top of all these other things. So when we are doing an import, right, it goes from top to bottom. It's cascading. So these other partials down here, they're going to be using these variables. And if we don't import the variables first, they're not going to have access to them yet. So that's why you always need to make sure that you get your variables in first, and then you can throw everything else underneath it. So one thing that's really cool that I want to point out about SASS is the way that it handles imports. All right, so in CSS, you can use imports and say you want to modularize your CSS and you create 10 CSS files to help separate and organize things. When you take those 10 CSS files and import them into the main CSS file, it makes 10 HTTP requests to the browser. So it slows down the load time. Whereas SASS, since it's a preprocessor to CSS, what we can do is it takes all of those imports, imports it into the master SASS file, and then only makes one import request when we compile it to CSS. So it's only making one HTTP request to get all these different style sheets compiled into our one file. So really cool stuff. All right, so now that we've got our variables here, let's go ahead and grab the variables from our base partial. So we'll go in here and we're just going to cut this out, snake this up to the top here, and we can go into our variables file here and paste those, and then we have some more hiding in our Sass file. Cool. And we're going to bring that down here and we'll paste it here. So now that we're here in our variables file, so let's go ahead and think outside the box here and decide what colors that we want to use in our projects, maybe some additional fonts and some other styling properties. So let's go ahead and we're going to use 5 colors to build the site with. So let's create a primary color. So I'm going to do brand primary, and then we're going to equal this to a green color, and it's going to be 00 AA8D. So we've got a primary color, and let's create a secondary color. We'll do brand secondary. Spelled that wrong, I know. Brand secondary, and let's make this like a lighter black, but like a super dark gray. I like to favor this color. And then we've got our brand dark. I'm gonna put that up here, makes more sense to me. We've got our brand light, and then I want to use a, I don't know, let's just use some type of a gray color, like a lighter gray. Like we've got this dark gray, let's make a lighter gray. So we're gonna just do, I'm just gonna call it brand gray and just spell it out there, brand gray. Cool. So let's go ahead and create another font stack to work with. And I'm actually going to rename this because I can. And we're going to call this font stack and then serif. And then what I want to do here is call this font stack sans serif. All right. And then we're going to use Helvetica and then Arial and then sans serif. Cool. So we've got 2 different fonts here. And then let's go ahead and just do font base and say all the text that's on the web page, give it a default size of 16. And then for fun, let's just use something called like font large, and we'll make it like 40 pixels. All right, so we've got that saved. So now in our variables, we've set up some variables that store some information that we can use globally now inside of our other partials. All right, so let's go ahead and snake this up, and we've got the brand dark on there. That's fantastic. And then we were working in our layouts, and let's dive into sections. Now what we want to do here with the sections is in here is where we're going to build a section container type of thing, and it's going to hold a grid of some styled boxes. So inside of our HTML, I've already created an ID called main content. So we'll go ahead and simply grab that. All right, and then inside of this main content, so remember this is acting as a container. All right, so we want to make sure that this container always takes up 100% of the viewport that it's in. And then we're going to go ahead and give this thing some padding, and we'll give it 20 pixels top and bottom, 30 pixels left and right. Now with that being said, I want to make sure that the size of this box is true and not taking the width of the element and adding that padding to it. So we can use the box sizing property, border box, to include the entire width of our container here and include the padding so it gives us a really solid size. And then let's give it a display, and I'm going to do inline block. And because we're going to be throwing some styled boxes inside of this, I want to make sure that they display inline, so it stacks left to right, but with the block element so that it expands the full width of the viewport. Otherwise, if I did a display of block, everything would just simply stack on top of each other. I don't want that to happen. And then the last thing that we're going to do is give this a background color, and we had the brand, look at this, I type in brand and it tells me what we have available. I'm going to use the brand light. So remember, the brand light was that, where's our variables? The brand light was this very, very soft gray color. It's not white, but it's a very, very light gray. So all of this is saved. We do have an error. So the font sans serif. Oh, that's right. Remember, I changed a name, and this is in the base Sass file. Don't you love those errors, how descriptive they are? And we changed this to stack. Forgot about that. So very cool. Now I've saved that, and everything has compiled beautifully. So let's come here, and we're going to refresh this. So cool. We've created this section, which now can hold some content of ours. Now the last thing that we want to do here is go ahead and style the nav bar. So let's jump into our text editor here. Now let's think about this. Is the nav bar going to go into our layouts, or is it going to be used as a module? The nav bar makes sense as a layout, right? Because it is a section at the top of the page that holds content. But then again, nav bars don't only live at the top of the page. You can have top nav bars, right and left nav bars. You can put a nav bar anywhere you want on your page. So it's going to work more as a module because it is a component that can really be placed anywhere. So inside of our modules, let's go ahead and create a navbar partial. So underscore, and I'm just going to call this navbar.sass. Cool. So now let's go ahead and quickly build this thing out. So inside of our HTML, if we go into here, we have called our navbar main nav. And then you can see in here that we've got an unordered list of some anchor tags. All right, so let's go ahead and work with that. So let's grab our main nav, and let's give it some designs. Let's give this a background color, and we are going to go ahead and grab our brand primary. Okay, it's that a little bit of a lighter green. And then we want to make sure that the width is 100%, so it expands the entire width of the viewport. And then we'll give it a display of block. And then let's give this thing some padding. Let's give this 10 pixels from the top, 0 on the right or left, and let's give this 40 pixels from the bottom. Here's something cool that I want to show you with Sass. So just like HTML has a hierarchy of things, you can do the same thing with Sass. So for an example, we've grabbed our main nav ID here, where all of our nav items live. We can simply hit enter. And now we're going to grab the unordered list, and we're going to go ahead and add some styles to that. So let's give it a margin of 0, padding of 0, and then let's give it a list style of none. All right, and then inside of this, we can create our list item here. And we will give it a float left, so that way those list items will stack left to right. And then we're going to go ahead and give this a margin. That's what we want, a margin left, and we'll give it like 30 pixels. That way it's going to take those anchors and spread them out. And then we can dive in again and grab the anchor tag. Not the align, we want the anchor tag. Thank you. We're going to add a text decoration of none because we want to remove the underlines. And then we're going to give this a font size of 22 pixels. Let's give it a color, and we'll grab our brand light. And then check this out. We can even use the ampersand here, do a colon, and then hover. And then we'll give this a background color of red. So pretty cool. Now, one thing, if you remember in regular CSS, if we wanted to use this hover before, I would have to put an anchor tag or whatever class or ID that I'm using and then use the hover. But the ampersand will simply grab the parent element here, and then it will add the hover to it. All right, cool. So this is looking good. And looking at this, I actually want this to be a list style type. All right, so we've got everything saved here. Looks like everything has compiled nicely. And then we also, remember, we need to come into here and then import. I'm glad I remember this. We need to import our navbar. So just like that, navbar. Awesome. So we can go ahead and save. And that's better. It just wrote the 2 files. Okay, it detected the changes before, but it didn't write any files. But now we imported it, so it wrote it for us. So let's come here and go ahead and refresh that. Dude, that's looking sick. And then we can come here. Oh, you know what? I don't want the background to do that, to hover. We simply just want the color to change. Let's change that real fast. All right, and then we'll refresh this. There we go, much better. So very cool. So that wraps up the first part of using variables, and we learned some really important facts about imports. Very cool. That is a wrap. Let's move on.